If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel. Sharing it with your friends and family helps spread knowledge, and when we help others grow, we grow too. Thank you so much for listening. Let's dive into the podcast. Chapter 1, Ancient Foundations, Mind, Brain, and Self. Part 1, The Vedic Dawn, Early Ideas on Consciousness and Matter. In the beginning time, the wise ones who composed the sacred songs looked beyond the world they could touch and see. They knew that something greater moved within all things. The fire burned on the altar, but they asked who made the fire burn with such power. The wind blew across the land, but they wondered what force guided the wind's path. The earliest sacred songs speak of prana, the life breath that flows through all living beings. This breath was not just the air moving in and out of the body. It was the divine force that made thought possible, that made the heart beat, that made the eyes see meaning in what they looked upon. The ancient singers knew that this life force worked through the body, but came from a realm beyond the flesh. In the sacred fire ceremonies, the priests would chant words that spoke to powers dwelling in hidden places. They called upon Agni, the fire god, not just as flames that burned wood, but as the light of awareness burning within the mind. They praised Vayu, the wind god, not only as the air that moved across the earth, but as the breath that carried thoughts from one moment to the next. The early hymns tell us that manas, the thinking faculty, stands apart from the physical organs. The eyes see, but manas gives meaning to what is seen. The ears hear sounds, but manas understands the words. The hands touch objects, but manas knows whether to hold on or let go. This thinking power works with the body but does not depend on the body alone. The sacred verses speak of two worlds existing together. One world contains everything we can measure and weigh: the mountains, rivers, animals, and human bodies. The other world holds the thoughts, feelings, dreams, and spiritual experiences that cannot be touched or seen by others. Yet this unseen world shapes everything that happens in the visible world. The ancient teachers understood that consciousness flows like water through different vessels. The same divine awareness that lights the mind of the sage also dwells in the heart of the simplest person. The difference lies not in the consciousness itself, but in how clearly each person can perceive this inner light. When the Vedic seers performed their rituals, they worked with both worlds at once. Their hands offered grain and butter to the flames, while their minds offered prayers and intentions to the gods. They knew that every outer action must be guided by inner understanding, and every inner realization must find expression through right action. These early insights planted seeds that would grow into the great philosophical teachings of later times. The separation between the world of matter and the realm of consciousness became the foundation upon which all future wisdom would build. Part 2. Upanishadic Explorations, Distinguishing Soul, Mind, and Body. The great teachers of ancient times saw that understanding required going deeper than what the Vedic hymns had shown. In the sacred texts called Upanishads, wise masters began to ask new questions. They wondered about the nature of the self that experiences all thoughts and feelings. They questioned whether this inner witness was the same as the mind that thinks and worries each day. In the forest schools, students would sit before their teachers and ask, "What am I? Am I this body that grows old and dies? Am I these thoughts that come and go like clouds in the sky? Or am I something else entirely?" The teachers would guide them through careful examination of their own experience. They discovered three distinct layers of existence. First came the physical body, which they could see and touch. This included the brain, the heart, and all the organs that keep life flowing. Second came the mind, called manas, which receives impressions from the senses and creates thoughts, desires, and emotions. Third and deepest came the soul or self, called Atman, which observes all experience but remains unchanged by it. The teachers used simple examples to show these differences. They said the body is like a house, providing shelter and structure. The mind is like the activities that happen inside the house, cooking, cleaning, talking, and thinking. But the self is like the awareness that watches all these activities without being affected by them. One master taught, when you dream at night, your body lies still on the bed. Yet in the dream, you seem to walk and run and speak. What moves in the dream? It is not the physical body. It is the mind creating experiences from memory and imagination. And what watches the dream? That is the self, which remains aware even when the body sleeps and the mind creates its stories. Another teacher explained, the mind acts as a bridge between the outer world and the inner self. Through the senses, it receives colors, sounds, tastes, and textures. It sorts these into pleasant and unpleasant, known and unknown. Then it presents this organized information to the self, which simply witnesses without judgment. They taught that the brain belongs to the physical world. Like the eyes that see or the ears that hear, the brain processes information, but the mind operates on a different level entirely. It can remember the past, imagine the future, and create thoughts that have never existed in the physical world. The self stands apart from both brain and mind. It neither thinks nor feels, yet it knows all thoughts and feelings. It neither acts nor speaks, yet it is aware of all actions and words. Just as a mirror reflects images without being changed by them, the self reflects all experience while remaining pure and untouched. This teaching became the foundation for all later spiritual practice. Students learned to distinguish between these three levels of their being. They practiced watching their thoughts without getting lost in them. They observed their physical sensations without identifying with them. Through this patient observation, they began to recognize their true nature as the unchanging witness of all change. The masters emphasized that liberation comes through this recognition. When you know yourself as the eternal self rather than the temporary mind or body, fear and suffering lose their power. The mind may still think, and the body may still feel pain or pleasure, but you remain established in peace because you know these experiences do not define who you truly are. Part 3. The internal instruments: Manas, Buddhi, Ahankara, and Chitta. The ancient teachers described 4 inner instruments that work together to create our experience of being alive and aware. These instruments are called antakarana, which means the inner workings of our mind and heart. The first instrument is manas, the thinking mind. Manas receives messages from your eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. It takes these messages and creates thoughts about them. When you see a beautiful flower, manas forms the thought, "This is beautiful." When you hear a loud sound, manas creates the thought, "This is frightening," or "This is pleasant." Manas also creates desires and wishes. It says, "I want this," or "I do not want that." This instrument never stops working. Even in sleep, it continues to create dreams and images. The second instrument is Buddhi, the wise mind that makes decisions. While Manas creates many thoughts and desires, Buddhi looks at these thoughts and chooses which ones are right or wrong, helpful or harmful. Buddhi is like a judge who examines evidence before making a final decision. When Manas says, "I want to eat sweet food," Buddhi considers whether this is good for your health and makes the final choice. Buddhi also helps you understand deep truths about life and guides you toward what is right. The third instrument is Ahankara, the sense of I am. This creates your feeling of being a separate person with your own identity. Ahankara says, "I am tall, I am smart, I am Indian, I belong to this family." It creates the boundary between you and the rest of the world. Without Ahankara, you would not know where you end and others begin. But when Ahankara becomes too strong, it creates pride, jealousy, and the feeling that you are better or worse than others. The fourth instrument is Chitta, the storehouse of memory. Everything you have ever experienced, learned, or felt gets stored in Chitta. This includes memories from this life and, according to the teachings, experiences from previous lives. Chitta brings up old memories when something reminds you of the past. It also holds deep patterns and habits that shape how you respond to new situations. These four instruments work together constantly. When you meet an old friend, your eyes see their face and manas recognizes them. Chitta brings up memories of time spent together. Ahankara creates the feeling, this is my friend, someone important to me. Buddhi decides how to respond appropriately. The ancient texts explain that these instruments are not physical parts of your brain. They are subtle forces that use the brain and nervous system to function, but they exist beyond mere matter. The brain is like a computer, but these four instruments are like the software that runs on it. Understanding these instruments helps you gain mastery over your inner life. When you recognize that manas creates endless thoughts, you can choose not to believe every thought. When you see how Ahankara creates separation and conflict, you can soften your sense of being different from others. When you understand how Chitta brings up old patterns, you can work to change harmful habits. The wise ones taught that by studying these four instruments carefully, you begin to discover the witness consciousness that observes them all working. This witness is your true self, beyond the movements of mind and memory. Part 4. Chariot of Experience, the Bhagavad Gita's metaphor. HTML. The divine teacher Krishna spoke to his student Arjuna about the nature of human experience using the image of a chariot. He said that your body is like a chariot that carries you through life. The Atman, your eternal soul, sits within this chariot as the true owner and witness of all experiences. The senses are like 5 powerful horses that pull the chariot in different directions. Your eyes want to see beautiful things. Your ears want to hear pleasant sounds. Your nose seeks good smells. Your tongue craves tasty food. Your skin desires comfortable touch. These sense horses are always moving and pulling you toward what they want. The mind, called manas, acts as the reins that guide these sense horses. When the mind is scattered and weak, the senses run wild, like horses without proper control. They drag the chariot wherever they please, often into danger or suffering. But when the mind becomes focused and strong, it can direct the senses wisely, like a skilled driver holding firm reins. The intellect, known as Buddhi, serves as the chariot driver. This is your power to think clearly, make good choices, and tell right from wrong. A wise driver knows the proper path and keeps the chariot moving toward its true destination. A foolish driver gets lost and cannot control the horses, leading to accidents and wrong turns. Krishna taught that most people live with their sense horses running wild, while their mind holds loose reins and their intellect sleeps. They become slaves to whatever their senses want in each moment. They eat too much, seek too many pleasures, get angry quickly, and feel constant dissatisfaction. But the person who practices self-control develops a steady mind and clear intellect. Such a person holds the reins firmly and directs the sense horses with wisdom. They choose what to see, hear, taste, smell, and touch based on what serves their highest good, not just immediate pleasure. The Atman within remains peaceful and unchanging, watching this entire drama of chariot, horses, reins, and driver. It is never actually touched by the experiences of the journey, just as you remain separate from the car you drive. When you remember that you are the eternal Atman rather than the temporary body chariot, you find true freedom. This teaching shows that the physical brain is merely part of the body chariot, while the mind that controls the senses operates on a different level. The intellect that guides choices comes from an even subtler realm, and the Atman that witnesses everything exists beyond all physical and mental processes. Through understanding this chariot metaphor, students learn to distinguish between their true self and the various instruments they use for experience. They develop mastery over their inner life rather than being controlled by automatic reactions and desires. Part 5. The body's role, Sthula Sharira and the physical brain. The scriptures teach us about Sthula Sharira, the gross physical body that we can see and touch. This body includes the brain, which sits inside the skull like a soft, folded material. The ancient texts tell us that the brain belongs to the earth element among the 5 elements that make up our physical form. The brain serves as an instrument, just as a potter uses tools to shape clay. Without this instrument, the subtle mind cannot work through the body in the world of forms and names. The brain connects to nerves that spread throughout the body like roots of a great tree. Through these pathways, signals travel to and from all parts of the physical form. Yet, the scriptures make clear that the brain alone cannot create awareness. Just as a musical instrument produces no sound without a musician, the brain produces no consciousness without the subtle mind operating through it. The physical brain changes and ages, but the consciousness that uses it remains constant. Ayurvedic teachings explain that the brain contains 3 doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, that govern its physical functions. When these forces remain balanced, the brain serves as a clear channel for mental activities. When they become disturbed through poor habits or disease, the brain becomes clouded, and mental functions suffer. The texts describe how the brain receives impressions through the sense organs, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. These impressions travel through the nervous system to reach the brain, where they appear like reflections in still water. But the brain only receives and processes these signals. The actual knowing happens through the subtle mind that operates beyond physical matter. Ancient physicians understood that damage to specific brain regions affects certain abilities. They mapped how different areas control movement, speech, and memory. This knowledge proved that the brain serves as the physical foundation for mental expression in the world. Yet they also observed that consciousness itself remains untouched even when brain functions become impaired. The scriptures teach that the physical brain belongs to the realm of change and decay. All matter follows cycles of creation, preservation, and destruction. The brain grows in childhood, matures in youth, and declines in old age. Eventually, at death, the brain returns to the elements from which it formed. But the awareness that knows through the brain comes from a different realm entirely. This knowing principle neither grows nor shrinks, neither improves nor deteriorates. It remains as the unchanging witness of all mental activities that flow through the physical instrument of the brain. Through understanding this relationship between brain and mind, students learn to honor the body while not mistaking it for their true self. They maintain the brain through proper diet, rest, and spiritual practices, knowing it serves as a sacred vessel for consciousness to experience the divine play of creation. Chapter 2. Building the Structure, the Evolution of Mind in Hindu Philosophy. Part 1. The Subtle Body. Manas as the organizer of experience. The seers of old taught that beyond the physical body lies another form, subtle and unseen. This is called the Sukshma Sharira, the subtle body. Like a thread that runs through a pearl necklace, this subtle form connects all our experiences and holds them together. At the center of this subtle body dwells Manas, the mind. Manas is not flesh like the brain, nor is it the eternal soul. It stands between these two, serving as the great organizer of all that we experience in life. When the 5 senses bring knowledge from the world outside, Manas receives these messages. The eye sees color and form. The ear hears sound and music. The tongue tastes sweet and bitter. The nose smells flower and smoke. The skin feels hot and cold. All these sensations come to Manas like servants bringing news to their master. But Manas does not simply receive. It arranges and organizes. It takes the separate messages from each sense and weaves them into one complete picture of the world. When you see a fire, hear its crackling, feel its heat, and smell its smoke, Manas brings all these together so you know this is fire. Manas also gives birth to emotions. Joy and sorrow, love and anger, fear and courage all arise from its activity. When the senses bring pleasant news, Manas creates happiness. When they bring painful news, Manas creates suffering. Like a skilled craftsman, it shapes our inner feelings from the raw materials that the senses provide. The ancient texts say that Manas moves faster than wind and travels farther than space. In one moment, it can remember events from years past. In the next moment, it can imagine futures that may never come. This power makes Manas both a friend and an enemy to those who seek peace. Yet Manas serves a higher purpose than simply organizing the world of the senses. The wise ones taught that it can become a bridge to higher knowledge. When properly trained through discipline and practice, Manas can turn away from the constant chatter of the senses and look toward the eternal truth within. This training requires great effort. Just as a farmer must plow hard ground to plant good seeds, the seeker must work to control the wandering tendencies of Manas. Through meditation, right conduct, and devotion to truth, Manas can be made steady and calm. When Manas becomes still like a clear lake without waves, it reflects the light of the soul perfectly. In this state, the seeker begins to taste the freedom that lies beyond all mental activity. This is the goal toward which Manas, when properly directed, can lead the sincere spiritual aspirant. Part 2. Ego and Intellect. From Ahankara to Buddhi. The mind divides into different parts that work together. The wise ones teach that two parts control how we see ourselves and make choices. These are called Ahankara and Buddhi. One creates the sense of I am, and the other helps us understand truth. Ahankara is the part that says, I am this body, and this belongs to me. It makes us feel separate from others and different from the world around us. When Ahankara grows strong, it creates pride, anger, and fear. The person thinks only of their own needs and forgets the needs of others. In the great story of the Mahabharata, Duryodhana shows what happens when Ahankara rules the mind. He could not bear to see the Pandavas succeed. His ego made him blind to right and wrong. He thought, I deserve to be king, and no one can stop me. This thinking led him to war and destruction. Even when wise Krishna offered peace, Duryodhana's ego refused to listen. Buddhi works differently from Ahankara. This is the power to see clearly and choose wisely. Buddhi can tell right from wrong and truth from lies. It sees beyond immediate desires to understand what truly matters. When Buddhi is strong, the person makes good choices even when they are difficult. Arjuna shows how Buddhi can overcome confusion and doubt. When he saw his relatives in the enemy army, his mind became troubled. He thought, how can I fight my own family? But Krishna helped his Buddhi see the truth. Arjuna learned that his duty as a warrior was more important than his personal feelings. His clear understanding helped him act without attachment to results. The scriptures teach that Ahankara and Buddhi often fight within the same person. Ahankara wants pleasure and power. Buddhi wants wisdom and peace. The person who lets Buddhi guide their choices finds happiness. The person who follows only Ahankara finds suffering. Training the mind means making Buddhi stronger than Ahankara. This happens through study of sacred texts, service to others, and regular meditation. When the ego becomes quiet, wisdom can speak. The person begins to see that all beings share the same divine nature. King Janaka was known for this wisdom. Though he ruled a great kingdom, he never thought, I am the greatest king, or all this wealth is mine. His Buddhi remained clear and humble. He performed all his duties perfectly while remembering that he was not the body or the mind, but the eternal soul within. The goal is not to destroy Ahankara completely, for it has its place in daily life. Rather, the wise person keeps it in proper balance with Buddhi. The ego helps us function in the world, but wisdom guides us toward truth and freedom. Part 3. Memory as Foundation. Chitta and the Seat of Personality. Memory holds all the impressions that shape who we are. The scriptures speak of Chitta as the storehouse of the mind, where every thought, action, and experience leaves its mark. These marks are called samskaras, the seeds that grow into our habits, desires, and patterns of behavior. When a person acts with anger repeatedly, that anger creates deep grooves in Chitta. Like water flowing down the same path creates a river, repeated thoughts and actions create strong tendencies. A person who lies often finds it easier to lie again. A person who speaks truth finds truthfulness becomes natural. This is how Chitta shapes our character. The sage Patanjali taught that these mental impressions do not disappear when we die. They travel with the soul to the next birth, carrying forward our tendencies and desires. A child born with natural kindness may have practiced compassion in past lives. Another born with fierce temper may carry forward the samskaras of anger. But Chitta is not our enemy. It can be purified and trained. Through regular practice of meditation, prayer, and righteous action, we can plant new seeds. Good thoughts repeated daily become good habits. Pure actions performed regularly create pure tendencies. The great King Bharata provides an example. Despite ruling wisely for many years, he became attached to a young deer he had rescued. His mind filled with thoughts of the deer's welfare. At death, his Chitta carried these impressions forward, and he was reborn as a deer. Only in the next birth as the sage Jadabharata did he remember his true nature and achieve liberation. This shows how Chitta bridges the physical and spiritual worlds. Our bodies change and die, but our mental impressions continue. They determine not only our next birth, but also our capacity for wisdom and spiritual growth in this life. The disciplined person watches their thoughts carefully. They cultivate positive samskaras through daily spiritual practice. They study sacred texts, serve others selflessly, and maintain purity in thought and action. Gradually, the old negative patterns weaken, while new positive ones grow strong. Chitta responds to repetition and consistency. Just as a farmer plants seeds in prepared soil and tends them daily, the seeker plants good thoughts in the mind and nurtures them through regular practice. Over time, virtue becomes effortless and wisdom flows naturally. This foundation of purified memory supports all higher spiritual attainment. Without cleaning the storehouse of consciousness, meditation remains shallow and wisdom stays distant. But with patient work on Chitta, the mind becomes a clear mirror reflecting the soul's true nature. Part 4. Atman, the witness to the mind's drama. Beyond the storehouse of memory lies something far deeper. The ancient sages spoke of Atman, the eternal witness that watches all mental activity but remains untouched by it. This witness stands apart from every thought, emotion, and memory that passes through the mind. Atman is like the sky that holds all clouds, but is never stained by them. Thoughts come and go, like weather patterns, but the witnessing consciousness remains pure and unchanging. The mind may be happy or sad, angry or peaceful, yet something in you observes these changes without being affected. The sacred texts describe how great sages discovered this truth through direct experience. Sage Yajnavalkya taught his wife Maitreyi that the self cannot be seen because it is the seer itself. You cannot observe the observer with the mind, just as the eye cannot see itself. This witnessing presence is closer to you than your own thoughts. King Janaka realized this truth while ruling his kingdom. Though engaged in worldly duties, he remained established in the witness consciousness. His actions flowed naturally without the burden of doership. He understood that the real self neither acts nor is acted upon, but simply observes the drama of life. The mind creates the illusion of being the doer and experiencer. It claims ownership of actions and suffers the consequences. But Atman stands beyond this play of cause and effect. It neither performs good deeds nor commits sins. It watches the mind take birth, grow, suffer, and die, yet itself remains eternal. This creates the great philosophical debate between those who see the self as permanent and those who believe everything changes. The Buddha taught that no permanent self exists, only flowing streams of consciousness. But the Hindu sages insisted that beneath all change lies the unchanging witness. Sage Ramana demonstrated this truth to his followers. When they came with problems and questions, he would ask them to find the I that experiences these troubles. Through this inquiry, seekers discovered that the thinking mind is observed by something deeper. This observer needs no fixing or improvement because it is already perfect and free. The path to liberation requires distinguishing between the witness and what is witnessed. The mind, with all its knowledge and ignorance, joy and sorrow, belongs to the realm of change. But you, the true self, are the eternal awareness in which all experiences appear and disappear. When this recognition becomes firm, the drama of mental suffering ends. The mind may still function, but you no longer mistake yourself for its activities. Like an actor who knows he is not the character he plays, you engage with life while remaining centered in your true nature. This is the ultimate purpose of all spiritual practice, to recognize the Atman as your real identity and live from this understanding with natural freedom and peace. Part 5. Matter, Mind, and Moksha. Divergent paths in Samkhya and Yoga. Matter, mind, and moksha, divergent paths in Samkhya and Yoga. The ancient teachers speak of two paths that reveal the nature of mind and matter. Both Samkhya and Yoga schools teach about the same truth, but they show different ways to reach it. Like two rivers flowing toward the same ocean, these traditions guide seekers to freedom while taking separate routes. In Samkhya philosophy, the wise ones explain that everything in existence comes from two basic principles. The first is Purusha, the pure consciousness that never changes. This is the witness, the one who sees but never acts. The second is Prakriti, the creative force that makes all forms and experiences. Prakriti is like a great mother who gives birth to everything we see, feel, and think. The mind, according to Samkhya, emerges from Prakriti through a series of steps. First comes the great intellect called Mahat. From this cosmic intelligence arises the individual mind with its power to think and choose. Then come the senses, both for knowing and acting, and finally the physical elements that form the body and world. But Purusha remains separate from all this activity. Like the sun that lights up the world without being touched by what it illuminates, consciousness observes the dance of mind and matter without being changed by it. The mind may think it is the true self, but this is confusion. The real self is Purusha, pure and eternal. Liberation in Samkhya comes through perfect knowledge. When the mind clearly sees the difference between Purusha and Prakriti, freedom happens by itself. The wise person realizes that the true self never suffers, never acts, and never changes. All pain and pleasure belong to the mind and body, which are products of Prakriti. This knowledge alone brings complete freedom. The Yoga school agrees with these basic truths, but adds something crucial. Knowledge alone is not enough. The mind must be trained and purified through practice. Yoga means union, the joining of the individual self with the Supreme Self. But before this union can happen, the mind must become still and clear. The great teacher Patanjali explains that the mind has different states. Sometimes it is active and scattered, jumping from thought to thought like a monkey. Sometimes it becomes focused on one thing. The highest state comes when all mental activity stops completely and pure consciousness shines alone. To reach this state, yoga prescribes an eightfold path. The student begins with ethical rules and personal disciplines. These create a stable foundation for deeper practice. Then comes physical postures and breath control, which purify the body and calm the mind. After this preparation, the practitioner learns to withdraw the senses from external objects and concentrate the mind on a single point. Through sustained concentration, meditation naturally develops. In deep meditation, the mind becomes so absorbed in its object that the meditator, the process of meditating, and the object merge into one experience. Beyond this lies the highest state, where even this unified experience dissolves, leaving only pure consciousness. While Samkhya emphasizes discrimination between the true self and mental activity, yoga provides practical methods to achieve this discrimination. Both schools agree that the mind is not the brain. The physical brain belongs to the material world, but mind operates on a subtler level, connecting consciousness with matter. In both traditions, liberation means recognizing that consciousness was never bound in the first place. The mind creates the illusion of bondage through ignorance, but the self remains forever free. When this truth becomes living experience rather than mere intellectual understanding, the seeker attains moksha, the final goal of human life. These ancient teachings continue to guide those who seek to understand the relationship between mind, matter, and consciousness, offering both philosophical wisdom and practical methods for spiritual development. Chapter 3: Turning Points, Key Debates and Watershed Moments. Part 1: Dualism in Hindu Thought, Mind-Brain Interaction. The ancient seers of Hindu philosophy speak of the mind as distinct from the physical brain, yet bound to it in ways that have stirred great debates for thousands of years. In the Samkhya philosophy, the mind exists as subtle matter, different from the gross matter of the brain and body. The Samkhya Karika teaches that the mind, called manas, acts as the bridge between the pure consciousness of the soul and the physical world. This mind can think, feel, and remember, but it is not the same as the brain made of flesh and blood. The great teacher Kapila explained that the mind has three parts: the thinking mind that processes thoughts, the ego that creates the sense of I am, and the intelligence that makes decisions. These three work together, but remain separate from the brain tissue itself. The brain serves as the tool through which the mind expresses itself in the physical world. Patanjali, in his Yoga Sutras, describes how the mind can exist in different states. Sometimes it remains calm and clear. Sometimes it becomes disturbed and confused. He teaches that through practice, one can control the mind and make it still. This shows that the mind has its own nature, separate from the brain's biological functions. The Vedanta schools debate whether consciousness comes from the brain or exists beyond it. Some teachers argue that when the brain dies, the mind continues with its memories and tendencies, moving to another body. Others say the mind itself dissolves, leaving only pure consciousness. The Bhagavad Gita speaks of the mind as both friend and enemy. Krishna tells Arjuna that a controlled mind leads to peace, while an uncontrolled mind brings suffering. This suggests the mind has power over the brain's responses, not the other way around. Ancient texts describe cases of yogis who could slow their heartbeat, stop their breathing, and enter states where the brain showed no activity, yet their minds remained aware. These accounts challenge the idea that consciousness depends entirely on brain function. The debate continues in temple discussions and scholarly gatherings. Some argue that modern science proves consciousness comes from brain activity alone. Others maintain that the ancient texts reveal truths about mind and consciousness that science has yet to understand. This question touches the heart of human existence. Are we merely biological machines, or do we possess something beyond physical matter? The ancient wisdom suggests we are more than our brains, possessing minds that can transcend physical limitations through proper understanding and practice. Part 2: Advaita Vedanta, Non-Dual Reality and the Role of Mind. The great sage Shankara sat beneath the ancient banyan tree, surrounded by his disciples. One student asked, "Master, if the mind is different from the brain, how do we understand our true nature?" Shankara replied, "Listen carefully. There is only one reality, and that is Brahman. What you call mind, what you call brain, what you call self, all these are like waves on the ocean. The waves appear different, but they are nothing but water." Another disciple questioned, "But Master, we experience thoughts, feelings, and sensations. Are these not real?" "They appear real," Shankara answered, "but appearance is not truth. When you dream, the dream world seems completely real. Upon waking, you realize it was only in your mind. Similarly, this entire world of separate things, including the idea that mind and brain are different, is like a dream in Brahman." The student pressed further. "Then what is the mind's role in this reality?" Shankara explained, "The mind is like a veil that covers the sun. The sun is always shining, but the veil makes it seem hidden. Brahman is always present, but the mind creates the illusion that you are separate from it. The mind makes you think you are this body, these thoughts, these experiences, but you are none of these things." "How do we remove this veil?" asked another seeker. "Through right knowledge," Shankara taught. "When you truly understand that you are Brahman itself, the veil disappears. The mind that seems so important, the brain that seems so necessary, these are revealed as temporary appearances in the one eternal consciousness." A learned scholar challenged, "But surely the brain produces consciousness. When the brain is damaged, consciousness changes." Shankara smiled. "You have the relationship backwards. Consciousness is like space. When a pot breaks, does space get damaged? No, space remains unchanged. Similarly, when the brain is affected, Brahman remains untouched. The appearance of change happens only in the realm of illusion." "Then what happens at death?" the scholar asked. "Death is only for that which was born," Shankara replied. "Brahman is never born and never dies. What you think is death is simply the dissolving of one appearance into another. The eternal self continues, just as the ocean remains when individual waves disappear." The disciples sat in silence, contemplating these words. Finally, one asked, "How do we experience this truth directly?" "Stop identifying with thoughts and sensations," Shankara instructed. "Observe them as temporary appearances. Ask yourself, who is aware of these thoughts? Who knows these experiences? That knowing awareness is your true self. It is not produced by the brain or created by the mind. It is the very ground of being itself." Part 3. The Self and Perception, Nyaya and Vaisheshika Philosophies. In the ancient academies of Mithila, where logic ruled supreme, the great teacher Gautama spoke to his students about the nature of self and perception. His voice carried the weight of careful reasoning as he began his explanation. "Listen well," he said. "The self is not the body you see, nor the mind that thinks. The self is the eternal witness that experiences all things. When you see a flower, the eye does not truly see. When you think a thought, the brain does not truly know. Behind all these actions stands the Atman, the unchanging self that gives meaning to every experience." A young student raised his hand. "Master, how can we prove this? What evidence supports your words?" Gautama smiled. "Through direct perception, inference, comparison, and testimony. These 4 ways of knowing will guide us. Watch your own mind carefully. When you dream, your physical senses rest, yet you still experience sights and sounds. What part of you witnesses these dream experiences? It cannot be the sleeping body or the quiet senses. Something else must be aware." In another hall, the sage Kanada taught his followers about the fundamental particles of existence. "Everything you perceive," he explained, "consists of eternal atoms combining and separating. Your body, made of these particles, interacts with objects also made of particles. But the self that knows this interaction stands apart from all atomic combinations. Consider this example, Kanada continued. When you touch fire, your skin feels heat. The atoms of your finger meet the atoms of flame. This creates the sensation we call burning. But who experiences this sensation? Not the finger atoms, for they are merely matter. Not the fire atoms, for they too lack consciousness. The experiencing self exists beyond all material particles. The debates between these schools grew intense. Nyaya philosophers insisted that valid knowledge required logical proof. They developed elaborate methods for testing every claim about consciousness and perception. Vaisheshika thinkers countered by demanding material evidence for every statement about the mind. "Show us the self," challenged one Vaisheshika scholar. "If it truly exists, where can we find it? What does it look like? How much does it weigh?" The Nyaya master replied, "You ask for physical proof of something beyond the physical realm. This is like demanding to taste the color blue or hear the weight of a stone. The self reveals itself through its own activity, through awareness itself." These exchanges shaped centuries of philosophical inquiry. Students would gather in great halls, listening as their teachers dissected each claim about mind and consciousness. They learned to distinguish between the brain's physical processes and the self's awareness of those processes. Through careful observation and logical analysis, these ancient schools established foundations for understanding consciousness that continue to influence thought today. Their methods showed how human beings could investigate the deepest questions about their own nature using reason and direct experience together. Part 4. Encounter with Buddhism, contrasting views on the self. The great debates had reached their height when a new voice arose in ancient India. Prince Siddhartha, who became the Buddha, brought teachings that challenged everything the Hindu schools had established about the self and mind. "There is no permanent self," the Buddha declared to gatherings of seekers and scholars. "What you call the self is nothing but a collection of changing parts, body sensations, feelings, thoughts, mental formations, and consciousness itself. These 5 parts are always changing. Rare is the permanent self in this." This teaching struck at the heart of Hindu philosophy. For centuries, the Vedic traditions had taught that the Atman, the eternal self, was the foundation of all experience. The Upanishads proclaimed, "Tat Tvam Asi," you are that eternal reality. But now came a teacher who said there was no eternal self at all. Buddhist monks would arrive at Hindu centers of learning, ready to debate. "Show us this self you speak of," they would challenge. When you examine your mind carefully, what do you find? You find thoughts arising and passing away. You find emotions coming and going. You find consciousness shifting from one object to another. But where is the permanent self that experiences all this? The Hindu scholars responded with vigor. "The very fact that you can observe these changes proves there is an observer," they argued. "Who knows that thoughts are changing, if not the eternal knower? The self is not found among the changing contents of experience, because it is the unchanging witness of all experience." These debates raged in royal courts and forest hermitages. King Milinda questioned the monk Nagasena about the nature of self and mind. Great philosophers like Nagarjuna developed Buddhist logic to show the emptiness of all phenomena, including the self. The Buddhist teaching of dependent origination added another challenge. All mental and physical phenomena arise in dependence upon causes and conditions, the Buddhists taught. Nothing exists independently. Your thoughts depend on previous thoughts, on sense experiences, on the brain's functioning. Where is room for an independent, eternal self? Hindu thinkers were forced to refine their positions. Shankara later emerged, partly in response to Buddhist challenges, developing a sophisticated, non-dual philosophy. Other Hindu schools developed new arguments for why consciousness required a permanent self as its foundation. The encounter transformed both traditions. Buddhism developed its own detailed analysis of consciousness and mental factors. Hinduism deepened its understanding of how the eternal self related to the changing mind and body. These philosophical battles shaped the spiritual landscape of ancient India, creating lasting questions about consciousness, self, and the nature of mind that continue to influence thought across the world today. Part 5. Media, Modern Science, and the Ancient Debate. Modern times have brought new life to ancient questions about mind and consciousness. When scientists began studying the brain with new tools, they found themselves asking the same questions that Hindu sages had explored thousands of years ago. In the early days of brain research, Western scientists thought the brain created all thoughts and feelings. They believed consciousness came only from brain activity. But as they learned more about how the brain works, some began to wonder if there was something more. Hindu texts had always taught that consciousness was different from the physical brain. The Upanishads spoke of awareness as something beyond matter. The Bhagavad Gita described the self as separate from the body and mind. These ideas seemed strange to many Western thinkers at first. But then researchers began finding things that made them think twice. They studied people who had near-death experiences. Some patients described being aware when their brains showed no activity. Others remembered things that happened when they were unconscious during surgery. Scientists also studied meditation. When they looked at the brains of people who had practiced for many years, they found surprising changes. The meditators could control their thoughts and emotions in ways that seemed impossible. Their brains worked differently, but they also reported experiences that went beyond what brain scans could measure. Television shows and movies began exploring these questions too. Popular books compared ancient wisdom with modern science. People became curious about what Hindu teachings might offer to understanding consciousness. Some researchers started reading Sanskrit texts. They found detailed descriptions of different levels of awareness. The ancient texts described states of consciousness that modern psychology was just beginning to study. They talked about how the mind could exist beyond the physical brain. Medical doctors began noticing patients who seemed to know things they should not have known. People in comas sometimes heard conversations. Others had experiences during operations when their brains were not working normally. These cases made some doctors question what they had learned about consciousness. Universities began offering courses that combined Eastern philosophy with brain science. Students studied both neuroscience and Vedanta. They learned about brain chemistry and also about ancient ideas of the eternal self. The internet helped spread these conversations around the world. People could read original Hindu texts online. They could also find the latest brain research. This created new discussions between old wisdom and new knowledge. Today, some scientists think consciousness might be more than just brain activity. They study how awareness might work in ways we do not yet understand. Others still believe the brain creates all experience. This debate continues, bringing together ancient Hindu insights and modern scientific methods in ways that would have amazed both ancient sages and early brain researchers. Chapter 4. Consequences and Legacy. The Mind Beyond the Brain. Part 1. Spiritual Practices. Transcending the Mind to Realize the Soul. Through the practices of yoga, meditation, and devotional worship, the soul learns to separate itself from the workings of the mind. These ancient methods teach us that the mind is not our true self, but a tool that can be trained and controlled. The practice of yoga begins with control of the body. When we sit still and breathe slowly, the mind becomes quiet. The spinning thoughts that usually fill our heads start to slow down. This is the first step toward knowing our real nature. In meditation, we watch our thoughts without following them. We see how the mind jumps from one idea to another, like a monkey jumping between trees. But we learn to sit peacefully and simply observe. When we do this regularly, we discover something amazing. There is a part of us that watches the mind, but is not the mind itself. This watcher is the soul. The great sage Patanjali taught that yoga means stopping the movements of the mind. When the mind becomes completely still, we realize our true self. This self exists beyond all thoughts and feelings. It is pure awareness that never changes. Many saints have walked this path before us. They practiced for years, training their minds like a rider trains a horse. At first, the mind fought back with strong desires and fears. But through patient practice, it learned to obey. Eventually, these holy people reached a state where they could turn off their thoughts completely and rest in pure being. The practice of puja, or worship, also helps train the mind. When we offer flowers, light lamps, and chant holy names, we give the mind something sacred to focus on. This stops it from wandering toward harmful thoughts. Over time, the mind becomes pure and peaceful. Ancient texts tell us about different levels of consciousness. At the lowest level, we are completely controlled by our thoughts and emotions. At higher levels, we can watch our minds from a distance. At the highest level, we merge with the source of all consciousness and know ourselves as eternal souls. These practices prove that the mind and brain work together, but are not the same thing. The brain is physical matter that can be touched and measured. The mind includes thoughts, memories, and emotions that use the brain but are not made of brain tissue. Beyond both mind and brain exists the soul, which is pure consciousness itself. When spiritual seekers practice these methods with dedication, they experience direct proof of these truths. They discover that their real identity lies beyond all mental activity. This discovery brings lasting peace and freedom from suffering. Part 2. Liberation and Consciousness, the Mind's Journey to Moksha. Liberation is the highest goal of human life. This freedom comes when the mind becomes completely pure and rises above all limitations. The ancient texts describe this journey in stages that every soul must travel. The first stage is understanding that you are not your body or your thoughts. Most people think they are their mind, but this is wrong. You are the consciousness that watches the mind. When you realize this truth, real spiritual progress begins. The second stage involves cleaning the mind of all impurities. These impurities are desires, fears, anger, and attachments that bind you to suffering. Through constant practice and devotion, the mind becomes calm and clear like a still lake. In the third stage, the mind becomes focused on the divine alone. All other thoughts fade away. The seeker experiences deep peace and joy that comes from within. This state is called samadhi, where the individual mind merges with universal consciousness. The fourth stage is complete liberation. The mind dissolves entirely into pure awareness. There is no longer any sense of being separate from the divine. This is moksha, the final freedom that all souls seek. Great sages have described this journey through their own experiences. They tell us that liberation is not something we gain from outside. It is our natural state that we rediscover by removing the coverings of ignorance. The mind plays a crucial role in this process, but it is not the final reality. The mind is like a tool that helps us reach the goal, but once we arrive, we no longer need the tool. The brain supports the mind during this journey, providing the physical foundation for spiritual practice. When liberation comes, even the purified mind becomes unnecessary. What remains is pure consciousness, which was always your true nature. This consciousness is beyond mind and brain. It is eternal, unchanging, and completely free. The scriptures promise that every soul will eventually reach this state. Some may take many lifetimes, while others achieve it quickly through intense practice and divine grace. The path may be long, but the destination is certain. This teaching shows that consciousness exists beyond physical matter. The brain may stop working when the body dies, but consciousness continues its journey toward ultimate freedom. This truth gives meaning to all spiritual effort and hope to every seeker. Part 3. The Lives of Sages, Human Actions in Shaping the Story. The great sage Vyasa lived long ago when the world was young. He spent many years in deep thought about the nature of mind and consciousness. Vyasa wrote the Mahabharata, which contains the Bhagavad Gita. In this sacred text, he showed how the mind works differently from the physical body. Through his life of study and meditation, Vyasa learned that consciousness exists beyond the brain. Vyasa made a choice early in his life. He could have lived like other people, enjoying worldly pleasures. Instead, he chose the path of knowledge and spiritual discipline. This decision shaped not only his own understanding, but also influenced countless generations who would read his teachings. His mind became so pure through practice that he could see the true nature of reality. The sage Patanjali also dedicated his life to understanding consciousness. He wrote the Yoga Sutras, which explain how the mind can be controlled and purified. Patanjali faced many challenges during his spiritual journey. Sometimes his mind would become restless and filled with doubts. Other times he would experience periods of great clarity and peace. Through these experiences, both difficult and joyful, he learned that the mind is like a lake that can be either turbulent or still. Patanjali taught that the mind has different layers. The outer layer deals with daily thoughts and emotions. The deeper layers contain memories and habits from past actions. At the deepest level lies pure consciousness, which is beyond all mental activity. This consciousness does not depend on the physical brain for its existence. The sage Shankara lived much later, but continued this same investigation. He traveled across India, debating with other teachers about the nature of reality. Shankara argued that consciousness is the fundamental truth of existence. Everything else, including the mind and brain, appears within consciousness like dreams appear during sleep. Shankara faced opposition from many scholars who believed the physical world was the only reality. Through patient reasoning and direct spiritual experience, he showed that consciousness cannot be reduced to brain activity. His debates and teachings helped establish this understanding in Hindu philosophy. The female sage Gargi also contributed to this great discussion. In ancient times, she challenged the greatest teachers with her questions about consciousness and reality. Gargi asked, "What is that upon which everything else depends?" Through her inquiries, she showed that even space, time, and mind must have a deeper foundation. These sages all made the same fundamental discovery through their lives of discipline and inquiry. They found that consciousness is not produced by the brain, but is the source from which all experience arises. Their personal stories of struggle, insight, and realization became part of the larger teaching that continues to guide seekers today. Their legacy shows that human choices and actions can transform understanding. Each sage's dedication to truth added to the collective wisdom about consciousness and its relationship to the physical world. Their lives prove that the mind can indeed transcend its apparent limitations. Part 4. Integration in Modern Hindu Thought, Reconciling Science and Spirituality. The ancient wisdom of our sages now meets the discoveries of modern science. Today's Hindu thinkers face a great challenge. They must bridge two worlds of understanding about consciousness and the mind. Modern Hindu scholars study both neuroscience and sacred texts. They seek to show that ancient teachings about consciousness match what scientists discover about the brain. Some say the brain creates all thoughts and awareness. Others hold firm that consciousness exists beyond physical matter. Dr. Deepak Chopra and other modern teachers write books that blend quantum physics with Vedantic philosophy. They argue that consciousness is the fundamental reality from which all matter emerges. This view supports the ancient teaching that Brahman is the source of all existence. Scientists like Dr. Chopra, Stuart Hameroff work with Hindu philosophers to explore consciousness. They study how awareness might exist in quantum processes within brain cells. Some propose that consciousness uses the brain, but is not created by it. This matches what the Upanishads taught thousands of years ago. Medical doctors trained in both Western science and Ayurveda treat patients differently. They see mental illness as both chemical imbalance and spiritual disconnection. This approach honors both brain chemistry and the soul's needs. Treatment includes medication alongside meditation and yoga practices. The Art of Living Foundation and similar organizations teach millions of people worldwide. They combine scientific stress research with ancient breathing techniques. Students learn that their minds can be trained through specific practices. This proves that consciousness has power over physical brain states. Modern Hindu universities create new departments that study consciousness. Professors teach both neurology and meditation. Students learn to measure brainwaves during spiritual practices. Research shows that experienced meditators have different brain patterns than ordinary people. Young Hindu scientists face difficult questions. Their Western education emphasizes material explanations for everything. Yet their cultural heritage teaches that spirit transcends matter. Many find ways to honor both perspectives without abandoning either. Technology now allows scientists to study meditation and prayer. Brain scans show what happens during deep spiritual states. Some findings support ancient claims about higher consciousness. Others suggest that all spiritual experience comes from brain activity alone. This ongoing dialogue creates new possibilities. Neither pure materialism nor traditional spirituality fully explains human consciousness. The synthesis of both approaches may reveal deeper truths about the nature of mind and reality. The conversation continues in temples, universities, and research centers worldwide. Each generation must find its own way to understand consciousness, while honoring both scientific discovery and spiritual wisdom. Part 5. Enduring Questions: The Meaning of Mind for the Future. The sacred texts speak of questions that live beyond time. The Bhagavad Gita teaches that the mind is but a tool, yet the soul remains eternal. This wisdom creates mysteries that each generation must explore anew. Krishna told Arjuna that the wise see beyond what appears real. The body dies, the brain stops working, but consciousness continues its journey. This teaching challenges every age to understand what lies beyond physical matter. The Upanishads declare that the self is not born, nor does it die. It is not cut by weapons, burned by fire, or wetted by water. This eternal principle raises questions that modern science struggles to answer completely. Today's seekers face new challenges. Brain scanners show activity during meditation, but cannot capture the essence of awareness itself. Computer intelligence grows more powerful, yet lacks the inner knowing that sages describe. Ancient wisdom asks whether machines can ever experience the bliss that comes from understanding one's true nature. The text suggests that consciousness cannot be created or destroyed, only discovered within. Future generations will inherit these same questions in new forms. Will artificial minds ever know the peace of samadhi? Can technology help souls remember their divine origin? The scriptures remain silent on these modern puzzles. The Mahabharata reminds us that dharma is subtle and complex. What serves righteousness in one age may need new expression in another. The duty to seek truth remains constant, but the methods continue to change. Young minds today study both brain chemistry and ancient mantras. They search for bridges between laboratory findings and temple wisdom. Some find harmony between both paths. Others choose one direction alone. The texts promise that those who seek with pure hearts will find answers suited to their time. Each soul must walk its own path toward understanding. No single approach serves every seeker's needs. Questions multiply as knowledge grows. Does consciousness create the brain, or does the brain create consciousness? The sacred books suggest that this mystery serves a divine purpose. Through questioning, seekers develop the strength needed for spiritual growth. The future holds new technologies that will test ancient claims about mind and spirit. Virtual realities may simulate spiritual experiences. Genetic changes might alter consciousness itself. The eternal principles must guide these developments. Hindu tradition teaches that truth reveals itself gradually across many lifetimes. What remains hidden today may become clear tomorrow. What seems certain now may dissolve under deeper inquiry. The dialogue between science and spirituality continues because both seek to understand reality. Neither approach alone provides complete answers. The combination of both may serve future generations better than either path alone. These enduring questions ensure that the search for truth never ends. Each generation adds new understanding while preserving ancient wisdom. The mystery of consciousness keeps growing deeper as knowledge expands.